All right. Good morning. Hope everyone's having a great Wednesday. Welcome to the Bryan TV channel on YouTube. We've got a new segment we started this week. Bryan Smith, Bryan with an I. He might be joining us. He may not. But anyways, we're going to move forward. I got a great guest on for Winning Wednesday. The segment is brought to us by our friends over at Canaway. If you're tired of your athletes sucking down ibuprofen and products of the like their candy, then check out Canaway. It's got some ways to heal the body, improve the body, and deal with pain in a more natural and readily way that the body can actually use and not get torn down. So a lot of athletes are almost addicted to the stuff. So any way you can not use or limit the use of the ibuprofen type products is always good. So Greg, how are you doing, sir?
Doing fantastic. I got to be honest. I really wish I knew about this Canaway when I was an athlete.
It's good stuff. We had them come out and sponsor the H&I, and they were pretty popular. It's not something that is an immediate cure to pain. It's something that naturally takes a little time to do. But 2 or 3 days after using, I've got kids in the gym that they order and swear by it, because they don't have to take Advil all the time. They don't have to take Tylenol or whatever. And so it's really good stuff. So, I put the link in the show notes. So go check it out. Have your athletes check it out. It's not expensive. And it works. I mean, it works well. So, yeah. So, we have this segment, and what we're talking about today is, training without pits. And everyone knows the benefit of having a foam pit in your gym. But let's face it, there's a lot of gyms, a lot of owners of the gym, a lot of people around the country that don't have the luxury of having a foam pit. They just don't. Landlord won't let them dig holes in their really nice foundation. The ceiling's not high enough to put in above ground pits. A lot of limitations. And I know several coaches that trained for years having to go to someone else's gym to use the foam pits, but had, elite level athletes that, trained day in and day out without foam pits. And, you've experienced this as an athlete. So with that in mind, from the athlete perspective, what is that like?
So it's tough to a certain extent. I say it's tough to a certain extent, but if you grow up with it, you're used to it. So it really wasn't that big of a deal for me. I just found different ways to train different skills. Anytime I did have access to a pit, I always utilized it every time I got the chance. So I always, growing up with it, it wasn't that big of a deal. I live in New Orleans, and we can't dig more than 2 feet down into the ground without us getting water coming up through the ground. So it's a disaster. So the second I start, if I decided to dig a pit, I now have a pool with a lot of foam in it, and it's disgusting. Growing up with it, there were different methods. I don't think there were different methods that I really took. I just had to do. I had to change a few different things. Like if I was training double backs, instead of going into doing really high layouts, it's like, all right, now let's go into the pit and go chunk a double back. I had to do layouts up onto a stack of mats, and then eventually I had to do a layout to back onto that same stack of mats. That I remember doing a couple hundred of those, and then when it got down to training triples. Because I was training triples at one point. I was a power tumbler. I did gymnastics until I was 13, but I switched to power tumbling after that. But at one point in time, we were training triples, and I remember having two resi mats stacked on top of each other, 2 3-foot mats stacked on top of each other, and doing double tucks up onto those.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Especially the first time when you hit the mats the first time and you fall back onto the tumble track or something. It can be
that felt pretty good. It woke you up.
Oh yeah. If I wasn't already awake, it got me that time.
Well, so transitioning from, because you're the owner over at Empire Gymnastics Academy there in New Orleans, and transferring over from being, a gymnast and a power tumbler into being the gym owner and the coach, and not having the pit, facilities because, the water, and probably not having a high enough ceiling to put an above ground pit because that would take an extra, 10 feet of ceiling to do that. What is it like as a gym owner now that you're actually the coach and you're training athletes, and you have some high level guys? You don't have, all low level compulsory guys. You have some optional guys that are training some skills.
Yeah.
How is that? How is that transition?
So the transition wasn't that hard, and it wasn't that hard just because, like I said, I grew up with it. I at no point in time in any gym that I've ever been, and I've only been to 3 gyms, in my life. At no point in time do we have a pit. Actually, I lie. Riverbend bought a gym in Kenner, and they happened to have a pit there that was like quadruple insulated, but even still, we didn't really use it that much because it was all the way in Kenner, and I lived in New Orleans, and it was a hard thing to get over there and go use it. So, transitioning wasn't that difficult because I applied the same techniques that I used in power tumbling to get those bigger skills to all the other events. If you go back to the blog and you take a look, you'll see that, I put that resin mat into overdrive on just about every event. I've got a video I could probably find and post it on somewhere and show you guys. I had a guy that was doing double fronts off high bar, and he learned it with no pit. With the very first time he did it, we had to trust the drills that we did, and we started off with cast handstand, push off, and he would land on his feet. And then he tried to do the same thing out of a giant, just push off and land on his feet. And we constantly had 3 other guys on the other side of him pushing a resin mat underneath him because he was too tall to swing on the high bar with a resin mat in front. So, it wasn't just trusting him to do the right thing. It was also trusting 3 other guys on my team to make sure that they pushed the mat in, and then making sure that I was on time. There's a lot of trust involved, and especially, it's great when you have when you have a bigger team like that, because then you guys can do certain things that that it helps everybody all the way around. Besides them just pushing each other, now they're all big enough to like I said, throw a resin mat in when someone needs to. So the transition wasn't that difficult. It was just applying those same, out of the box thinking to bigger, higher level gymnastics skills as opposed to power tumbling.
Right. Now, looking at that, how do you get on P-bars, on rings, high bar, vault? You always slide resin mats in, or do you have spotting rigs? I know you mentioned in the blog that you had some spotting belts and you did different things with the spotting belts. How do those tools apply to each one of the events? You kind of went through each one on the blog, and hey guys, go check it out. And we posted it up. It's at 10xminds.com. You can read the whole blog, but just in a summary, you used a resin mat, but you also use spotting rigs, and you also found other ways to start training drills. And you put in there, what takes someone 3 days to learn, it may take 3 months to train without the pit, but you can get it done.
Exactly. Yeah. So most of the pit, most of what I use the resin mat for floor, if they're a big time tumbler, we'll use it for everything that we do. If we're doing full ins, if we're doing double doubles, if we're doing, if they're working double fronts or anything like that, we'll use that resin mat for just about everything. And anything you can think of, if you want to tumble up onto, I'm sure every gym, that has a high level tumbler uses that. And if they do, that's exactly what you want, and that's exactly what I do. For rings, Can't really use a resin mat too much because the rings aren't adjustable, and the resin mat doesn't go down. So we gotta figure out different ways, different methods of that. One thing I do is for full outs on rings, we actually do a lot of trampoline drills where they're doing they learn how to do a cruise, because a cruise is a big deal for that full out. Once they're able to learn a cruise, they learn how to do a back tuck to stomach, cruise to stomach, and then from that point in time they go back tuck to stomach, cruise, front flip over to their back. So they're trying to create they're trying to learn how to create rotation and see the floor, then tuck their heads under and get them, and try and get them acclimated to that. I'll actually get on trampoline and do a little bit of hand spotting. It can be sketchy at times, but if I got to do it to be able to try and keep them safe, that's what I'm going to do. So for rings, that's a totally different story. Vault, just go up, make the mat higher. If they can do front handsprings to their feet onto that resin mat, or if they're doing, if they're working Suks or Kazamatsus or even Yuchenkos, anything like that, I just start stacking mats up, try and get it up as high as we can. And then I'll be, and first time I actually flipped, not me personally, but the first time I've actually had several of my athletes flip a handspring front or a Suk or something like that, was actually on 2 springboards on the ground onto an 8-incher. So we didn't use the vault table at all. I was actually, I was just, they were small enough. I'm kind of a big guy. And some of my athletes were pretty small. So I could grab them and just throw them through the air and at least get them used to that, get them used to that momentum or that movement, whatever it is we were doing. If they were able to get used to it down there, and then I was able to spot very little, I've had a couple kids do Suks off two springboards onto an 8-incher, and I didn't spot them. It was honestly, it was pretty incredible, even just from me watching. It was pretty impressive. If I know that I can do it down there and they can do it comfortably over there, if I get to a vault table and they can block decently well, we'll flip it over, and it's a heavy spot. It's a heavy being in a pitless gym. You're doing a lot of heavy spotting. So yeah, and then if you want to go over P bars, just put that resin mat next to P bars. I know everybody uses that, but what we'll do, yeah, right. I know I've seen you guys use it. What we'll actually do is we'll actually take the resin mat and we'll push it forward, so the edge of the resin mat is more like in the middle of the P bars, and then we'll put a wedge mat on top of that. So if the resin mat's here, the edge of the resin mat's here, your incline's going up this way, and so when they land, they roll down they do a back tuck, they land on their back, and they roll down the cheese mat onto their feet to try and help facilitate completing that double tuck.
Right. Now, you mentioned something that's very unique, and there's a number of coaches that have been acclimated to it, but there's a few that use it more than others. And you mentioned it in the blog, but you said it just a second ago. You do a lot of things on trampoline, like having a power tumbling background. You probably did a lot of trampoline yourself. How significant?
No trampoline.
No trampoline for you, just tumbling, huh? Well, how much, in training these skills, you utilize the trampoline quite a bit, and you even mentioned the blog. If there wasn't a drill for it, you'd come up with one.
Yeah. I'll try and take a flip by either to 3 different parts of their body: their feet, their back, or their stomach. Obviously not to their head, right? But like you've got 3/4 of the entire flip that you can potentially make a drill out of, if that makes sense. If I'm going to train fulls, if I'm teaching a kid to train fulls on floor or on tumble, since we're going to do that on tumble track first or trampoline, they'll learn a layout to stomach first. They'll do a back layout to their stomach, or even something so simple as a back tuck. When I first start teaching kids how to do back tucks, they have to do a stretch jump, pull their knees up like they're sitting in a chair, laying on their back on trampoline, pull over, and they land on their feet. It's very, very simple and very effective because it teaches kids to use their legs to do back tumbling as opposed to their head and chest, trying to throw their head backwards or something like that. But you've got those 3 points to create any kind of a drill out of. I said earlier when I was talking about doing full outs on rings, and we were talking about that cruise. I had a little guy doing this. I think I still have the video from it, but he was doing just a basic swing on rings, and he would do back tuck, cruise, and land in his stomach off the rings. Now, promise you that was absolutely spotted because I did not want him to over-rotate, and if I did, I would graciously sacrifice my arm or myself to make sure he didn't hurt his back or something like that. But that, those are some of the things so teaching those cruises, especially when it comes down to teaching twisting doubles, teaching that cruise, and teaching them to see the floor to make certain corrections. Oh, there we go. I'm sorry, my phone's ringing now. Anyway, teaching them those cruises to either spot the floor or if they're doing full ends. They got to be able to see the floor before they decide to do that second flip. For full ends, at least that's what I was taught. You do the full, you see the floor, you tuck over. At least for full and tucks, right? But yeah, that's kind of what utilizing that trampoline on just about any portion. If they can land on their stomach, they can land on their back, they can land on their feet, and you can create rotation to that point. For them to somehow understand what it is they're trying to do. And I try and communicate with my athletes all the time. They've got to be able to understand, they've got to be able to understand what they're training to. And sometimes you got to be cautious with that because sometimes that can start instilling some sort of fear into them. I've had that happen a couple times where, it's like, all right, guys, this is what we're training. And it's nothing that they're even remote. We're not even, that might be 2 years down the road, but automatically they put in their head, oh my God, I've got to do this. So you got to be careful with how you word certain things with them. Instead of saying, okay, guys, we're going to go do double backs off P-bars. Let's go do, a year and a half worth of these drills over here. I'm going to say, all right, I want to see your, you can do a layout off P-bars. I want to see you put that layout up onto that resi mat next to the P-bars, or layout to your back, or if you have a resi mat at the same height of the P-bars, I want you to do a back tuck and stand up on that resi mat, something like that. That's you got to be cautious with how you word certain things. So you're trying to get them excited about doing that bigger skill. What's the next step past that drill?
Right, without scaring them to death that hey, you're going to have to do this, and you don't have a pit.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
but trust me, you'll be okay.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a great thing, and I hope people will go read the blog, but I hope people will watch the video. And if you have questions for Greg, post them up. He has, as an athlete, he trained most of his career, or all of his career, without pits, and made it to a very high level. And now he's training in his facility and training, athletes that are moving into optionals and doing big optional skills. And he does this without a pit. And I know there's a number of people around the country that also do the same thing. And it's very tough to, figure out, okay, how am I going to progress an athlete from point A to point B, point B to point C, when I don't have, these safety nets? So, Greg has a wealth of knowledge. We can't share it all on the show in the small segment we have, but you have to understand, and he says in his blog, if you're a coach and you have the aspiration and the will to figure it out, you can achieve and produce great results. So if you go through and you're having trouble figuring out because you don't have a pit and it's not close to drive, 30 minutes and an hour, hour and a half. It's not, convenient for your athletes to go to someone else's gym to use their pits, once, twice, 3 times a week, whatever. You're going to have to figure it out. And Greg's got some great ways to do that, using the trampoline, using the Resi pit. If you don't have one, I would, that's one mat I would invest in, because it, like Greg said, we do a lot with it, and we have pits, and it's just one of those things you have to have. So Greg, in closing the show, is there anything that you would like to, just let the people know about? I mean, I know you host a meet. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we gotta close out.
So we do host a meet. We host the New Orleans Jazz Invitational. That has got to be the most fun weekend of my competition season. It's got to be the most fun I have in a weekend. We're downtown New Orleans. They got everything between the convention center where the competition's located all the way to Bourbon Street is walking distance. No need to rent a car. Just come on in, fly in, take a cab to the hotel, check in, and go to town. It's an absolute blast. Last year we were just under 1,000 kids. We broke the 1,000 kid mark, and we had a couple kids drop, so we were right under that 1,000 kid mark. We're hoping we get up a little bit higher this year, but we got some pretty high level girls competition and a decently high level boys competition. Thinking this year we might start getting a little bit more in. It's a lot of fun. We always have a coaches party. We try and get on Bourbon Street, usually on a balcony somewhere. It's a lot of fun.
There you go.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, this year you're not competing with H&I, so it should be a better year, right?
Yeah, finally.
Yeah. So you and I aren't competing with one another. You and I and Tim aren't competing.
So now you can come, because I'm planning to come to yours.
Well, I had some parents actually get really a little bit irate. We were at Jarrett Pogue's meet at the Winter Beach Blast meet, and a parent came to me, and he's very stern-faced. He goes, Coach, I need to talk to you. Okay, so I'm thinking, well, okay, his kid didn't do so good, so he's really pissed, right? So I said, what's up? He goes, and he pulls up this thing about your meet in New Orleans. He goes, why aren't we going to this? And I said, well, the schedule, and he goes, no. Why aren't we going to this? I love New Orleans. Any chance I get, any excuse to go, I want to go. So why aren't we going to this? So finally I just looked at him, I said, I'll tell you why. Because we're hosting the H&I that weekend, the same weekend as that. And we have, all these kids coming in. And so we're competing with one another this year, maybe in the future. So I'm sure that he's going to catch wind that your meet is not on our same weekend, and he's going to be back in my office. Now his kid's like he moved to level 5. So, he's not a high level kid yet, but yet he still wants to go just because of the fact that you said it's there in New Orleans. It's at the convention center. You fly in or you drive in, you park, and you can walk everywhere from there. So anyways, guys, check out the meet. Really good stuff. Greg, thanks for coming on. Guys, like and share the YouTube channel. Like to share this. I'll post it up on the region and also on the Texas men's page. And Greg, if you can do the same over in Louisiana, that would be awesome. If you got questions, Greg's always available. Just email him, and we'll try to put that email up in the show notes as well. Email him, and you guys can get together. He's got some great drills and skills and things you can learn without a pit.
Thanks, guys.
Right now, go win Wednesday, guys.